Hi, my name is Lynn Likens, and this is my final presentation for Business 350, Business Law, as presented to the faculty of Eastern University in partial fulfillment of the requirements for the Business Administration degree. My presentation today is going to be on checks. Now you may be wondering, what do checks have to do with business law? Well, for starters, if you hope to run a successful business one day, you're going to hope to have a lot of checks coming in, aren't you? You're going to need to know what to do with them all, and I hope this video presentation will give you some insight. The real reason checks are studied under business law is because of all the laws and regulations surrounding their use, most of which fall under the Uniform Commercial Code, or UCC for short. Checks are considered negotiable instruments under the UCC. By definition, a negotiable instrument is a written document acting as a substitute for cash. It is an unconditional promise from one person or company to pay a sum of money to another person or company, either on demand or at a specified time, and the document must contain a signature of the creator. There are 4 specific types of negotiable instruments recognized by the UCC. However, today we are going to focus on drafts, as that is what checks fall under. A draft is an order by a drawer for a drawee to pay a payee. The drawer gives the order to the drawee to pay a sum of money to the payee. The drawee then obeys the order and pays out the sum of money to the payee, who receives the benefit. By now you're probably thinking, wait, who pays whom for what? Let's take a look at how checks act as a draft. You're probably more familiar with this terminology, so I hope it will help clarify for you. The checking account holder is the drawer. She writes a check which orders the bank, the drawee, to pay the amount listed on the check to a specified recipient, the payee. We'll look a little bit more at how checks are regulated in just a bit, but for now, let's take a look at the checks themselves. Oh, hello. I see you're here to pick up your order. That'll just be $49.95. What's that? You wanted to write a check, but you're not sure how? That's no problem. I can teach you. This will probably be review for most of you, but having worked in the payment office of a college, I was quite surprised by how many people don't know how to fill out a check. You will start by filling in the current date in the space provided, usually at the top right corner of the check. You will then fill in the name of the person or company to whom you are paying. This information goes on the Pay to the Order of line. Next, write the numerical dollar amount in the small box next to the dollar sign. The same dollar amount is also written out in words, usually indicating the cents as a fraction over 100. Lastly, you need to sign your check on the signature line in order for it to be official. Not only is it important to learn how to write checks for yourself, but this information can also help you in reviewing checks you receive from customers before you deposit them in the bank. This is a check which I received. As you can see, the numerical dollar amount written next to the dollar sign does not match what was written out in words. I later received this notice from the bank indicating that they had to take the check for $800 and that they had deducted $75 from my account. This was a personal check written out to me, but imagine how this could be embarrassing if you had to go back to your customer and ask for the $75 difference. Or what if you're not able to track that customer down? You would simply be out the $75. Now that we've taken a look at how to write a check, let's look at some special checks which can also be useful. The first type of special check we're going to look at is cashier's checks. Cashier's checks are where the drawer and the drawee are the same bank, meaning that the bank draws the check on itself. The bank guarantees the funds for the check, and this is a near equivalent of cash, which means that there is an added guarantee for the payee. These can be purchased at any bank, regardless of whether you have an account there or not. Next, we have traveler's checks. Traveler's checks have specific requirements. They must be payable on demand. They have to be drawn on or through a bank. They need to be designated as a traveler's check, and they need to be countersigned. They are usually drawn by a large financial institution, such as the example pictured here, which is through American Express. When buying a traveler's check, the person signs the check when buying it, and then again when using it as payment. Much like signing the back of your credit card, this lets the merchant know that you are the authorized user. Next, we have money orders. You can pick up a money order just about anywhere. They're sold at banks, post offices, gas stations, and retail stores like Walmart. They're considered the same as a check. They're pre-printed with a dollar amount to be paid, and the purchaser signs as the drawer and then writes in the name of the payee. Next, we have certified checks, which are accepted at the bank at which they are drawn. The drawer writes a check and asks for it to be certified. The bank moves the funds to a certified check account and stamps the check, marking it as certified. The account holder is then no longer liable for the check, as the bank is the one guaranteeing the funds. Because these special checks require payment up front and oftentimes a fee, you may be wondering, well, what happens if I lose the check? As the remitter, you can request a refund for lost, stolen, or destroyed checks. To recover a cashier's check or certified check, you will need proper identification, and you will need to wait until at least 90 days following the date on the check for a cashier's check, or 90 days following the date of acceptance for a certified check. In order for a bank to pay a check, it must be considered properly payable. It must contain the drawer's authorized signature. It must be paid to a person entitled to enforce the check. It cannot be altered in any way. It cannot be completed by addition of any unauthorized terms. It needs to be paid on or after the check date, and there can be no stop payment order on the check. If the bank wrongfully dishonors a check, the bank may owe you damages. Once deposited, the check process depends on whether the bank for the drawer and the bank for the payee are the same or different. If it is the same bank, then on the first day, a provisional payment is made to the payee account. On the second day, if the bank has not dishonored the check, it is considered paid. And then on the third day, the provisional payment becomes an actual payment. If the banks are different, then the payee will deposit the check in her account at her bank, which is the depositary bank. The depositary bank must present or send the check to the payer bank through intermediary banks. Once received, the payer bank must dishonor the check or become liable for the funds. Technology has made a huge difference in the way checks are processed. It used to be that the check had to be sent from bank to bank until it finally reached the payer bank. Now it can be done electronically, which in some cases means it can be processed within the same day. The check clearing for the 21st Century Act allowed banks to forego sending original checks and instead send a truncated version, either a substitute check or an image along with magnetic ink character recognition data, or MICR. The MICR data, as pictured below, includes the bank code, bank account number, and bank check number for easy processing. There are, of course, requirements for substitute checks. They must be a clear replication of the front and back of the check. They must include the MICR line with all the information. There are industry standards for paper weight and dimensions, and they must be able to be processed in the same manner of automated processing as the original check. You and I both know that running a business takes a lot. Sometimes there's no time to even make it to the bank. If your business is the type that brings in a lot of checks, you can take advantage of substitute checks by getting a scanner for your office. This allows you to scan the checks directly to the bank. Once all those checks are deposited, who wants to wait around for their money? The big question is always, when will the funds be available? It used to be that you had to wait 10 business days for the check to clear. Thanks to the Expedited Funds Availability Act of 1987, this is no longer the case. The first $100 will be available the business day following the deposit. For checks drawn from a bank from the same Federal Reserve Bank area, meaning that they're local, the remaining funds will be available the second business day. For checks drawn on a different Federal Reserve Bank area, the remaining funds will be available on the fifth business day. There are still a few things left that we need to look at regarding checks and how they affect you. First, we'll look at the stop payment order. Say you send a check through the mail to pay a bill and the debt collector has not received it. You can send another check, but what if they receive both checks and cash both of them? You may want to request a stop payment order. This instructs the drawee bank not to pay on a check. You must request it in a reasonable time period, and you must be able to describe with reasonable certainty the details of the check, including the date, payee name, amount, check number, and account number. Remember when I taught you how to fill out a check? I specifically said you need to use the current date. Some people believe you can post date a check by writing a future date on it and that the bank will not cash it until that date. That isn't necessarily true. Automated systems do not monitor the dates. If missed and cashed, the bank could be liable, but usually they have a customer agreement that frees them from liability. The UCC stipulates that customers must give the bank notice if they wish for a check to be post-dated, and the bank may charge a fee for this. Unfortunately, not everyone today is ethical. It is your responsibility to review your bank accounts and keep an eye out for forgeries and alterations on your checks. The bank is liable for accepting a forged signature on a check unless you as the drawer were negligent. Perhaps you left a signature stamp out where someone else could use it, or maybe you issued a blank check. You also need to notify the bank within 30 days. After 1 year, if you have not processed a claim, you lose the right for recovery. Endorsements can also be forged. The liability for a forged endorsement falls to the first party to accept the forged instrument. The drawer has 3 years to report a claim, or else they lose their right to recovery. Checks can also be altered, meaning that an unauthorized change was made modifying the obligation of a party on the check. The bank is usually liable if an altered check is paid, unless the drawer fails to report it in a reasonable time frame, the drawer leaves a large blank space on the check so that additional words or digits can be written in to change the dollar amount, or if the customer and the bank are both negligent, then they usually share liability. Well, there's just one more thing to take care of before I let you go. I need to write you a check. So I'll make that out to William Bulow. And there you have it. Just a little something extra in hopes for a good grade. I'm just kidding, of course, but I hope you enjoyed this presentation and that you were able to learn a little bit more about checks. Thank you.